Hello everyone, and welcome back to another campaign diary. When last we left our heroes, they had gathered some information from a dwarf named Chassephone about a cave with a river flowing into it with an underground lake and a large serpent-like monster living inside it, and it was or perhaps wasn't guarding a sword fragment. Well, my players had gathered enough information to find the place and they were going there, and the way to this cave was quite calm, spare for a giant weasel, which they were first trying to kill, but they didn't want to do so anymore when one of the players spotted that she was in fact pregnant, which is good. So they found the cave, as well as a pier or bridge that had recently been built into the cave to sort of bridge the river and all of the water flowing down, and they found the collapsed tunnel that the cultists dug in order to get to the lake. But like I said, it had collapsed, so they couldn't cross it. And after a lot of back and forth, they decided to basically jump down the river so that the flow could hopefully take them to the lake. But they didn't do this straight away. No, they did some thinking, some investigation, and at some point the ranger used talk to animals or speak to animals, I don't know what the spell is called, to talk to a small group of salmon that had gotten lost in their journey upstream. And this was quite funny because I got the immense joy of having to roleplay some salmon who, of course, don't know what a cave is, and they don't know what a monster is or what a sword is and all of that stuff. So my players had to think of ways to communicate with these fish in terms that they would understand. and I also got to do some fun roleplay because I had to roleplay several salmon at once. So at some point, one of the players asked, "Hey, do you know if downstream over here there is a large dangerous creature?" And I sort of did the mumbling like, "Oh, I thought, did we see something dangerous? I don't know, didn't we see a sturgeon? No, I think it was a sprat. No, a sprat. No, that's tiny. No, that's not a danger at all." And then I described them all turning to the players saying, "No." But yeah, they had a look for the players in exchange for some food, and they saw the large monster lying on the floor in the cave, in the lake in the cave. And the salmon described this to the players, and the players, they decided to risk it. So they jumped into the river. In fact, they didn't all jump into the river. The druid turned into a giant toad and carried two of the players down, which was immensely polite. He did this because the two players were wearing heavy armor, so they couldn't really swim. He made this decision after another heavy armor wearer had stripped himself of his armor and already jumped in, but fair enough. So they all went down the tunnel, and I said, okay, you have to roll a strength check to make sure you aren't dragged down into the currents and you begin drowning, and you have to make dexterity checks so you can actually evade the rocky outcroppings coming at you as you rush down the river. And most of my players survived. Well, they all survived. Most of my players succeeded. One of them got slightly, he got pulled underwater, but it wasn't for too long. The other one, she took a severe beating while going down this rocky water slide, but fair enough. After that ordeal, they came into a large underground cavern, a large underground lake, in fact, and there were some small rocky islands inside it with large metal bells, you know, like the bells you see in clock towers, bells like that, standing on those islands. And on the other quote-unquote shore of the lake, there was a sort of church-like building. Well, after some healing and investigation, they went inside the church-like building. Inside this small building, well, it was still a building with quite a high roof. But yeah, inside this building, they saw a large crystal shard that housed the sword fragment, which is good, as well as a bell hanging from some chains. There were also some eye-shaped symbols on the wall, and the text, "Truth shall sound," which was, of course, DM speech to say, whoever built this place wants you to know to ring the bell. And my players did so. They knocked against the bell really loudly, and I described how a a very loud bell sound echoed through the chamber, how the pitons, at least the hooks holding onto the chains, just sort of resonated, and how they let go of the chains, and the bell coming down onto the floor and just deforming, and the sound of the bell becoming horrendously deformed and ugly. And now they had found another piece of the sword. They now have both pieces of the hilt, and one piece and the tip, essentially. The tip is a bit weird because it's sort of a combination between a sword and an axe, but whatever. So they only need one more piece. However, what I also described after this bell let out this horrendous noise was the sound of water coming down and a loud roar echoing through the caves. Yes, the creature was not dead, it was merely sleeping, and now they had to deal with it. So they went outside of the chamber, but still inside this large underground lake, and they began casting spells at it, shooting arrows at it, and they hit a few times, but at some point they missed, and I described the arrow hitting one of the bells on the other islands, and the beast getting distracted, turning its head towards the bell and just listening to it. And that's when the players understood, hey, this might be our way out. I also described some cages hanging near the bells, all the way at the ceiling of the cave, and some mechanism to lower the cages rapidly, but they sort of ignored it. Instead, they just kept ringing the bells by hitting them, either with a physical sword or a magical force weapon that someone conjured into existence, and like that they made their escape. They all managed to not so much swim, but climb upstream out of the cave again, and yeah, they all made it out alive perfectly fine. And I then described, well, okay, now you are on this part of the map where you just entered the cave, and it's quite nearby the goblin stronghold that you have once freed. So they make their way to the goblin stronghold. They had freed the goblin stronghold basically of a very tyrannical leader, and now there is a more gentle leader, more kind. She isn't all about kidnapping elves and stealing from elven farmers and merchants and all of that stuff. It's a nice goblin village, and they're just resting there for presumably only a night. I'm going to have to see how long they're going to rest. And they wanted to ask the goblins some questions about their history. But yeah, we're going to see what happens the next time when they get together. I have content prepared, and I'm really curious what they are going to do, because there are going to be some important choices up ahead for them in the next, either the next or the one after the next adventure. And I'm really curious to see what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. But yeah, if you've been watching or listening, thank you for doing so, and I'll see you next time.